Fair use. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. The following is not intended to harass and/or cyberbully.
Why should someone, for those who say, oh, this is a scam, this is a sham, this isn't real, this school doesn't exist, what do you say to those people out there?
Well, one thing I do know is dishonorable people will never let the truth get in the way of a good lie. So when people ask, does the school exist? Well, we're sitting here. There's various governmental agencies you can call or go to online and find out who the owner of these schools are. 2 years ago, I was audited by the state of Pennsylvania Auditor General due to complaints by Negroes who said I was stealing money. So I had to go through a whole audit, and we passed it with flying colors because nobody stole a penny. Last week, I got a threat letter from the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office who is threatening to take away my school psychologist certificate and principal certificate for engaging in alleged bigoted speech. But he did not give a single example of the bigoted speech that he was talking about. So I say all that to say that first of all, I don't believe there's anybody who really believe that we don't own these schools. I don't think there's anybody who really believes I've stolen any money. I don't think there's anybody who believes we're not going to get these schools open. But there are a lot of people who are envious and jealous about the fact that we will succeed. And in order to try to block the success of FDMG, they have manufactured lies and narratives, and they have acted on them. This is beyond YouTube videos. They have went to the IRS, they have went to the Attorney General, they have been to the governor of Pennsylvania, they have been to the governor of Delaware, they have been to the mayor's office, license and inspection, council persons, anybody you can name between Pennsylvania and Delaware. Every office, every white person they can find has been contacted and complained to about me by jealous black people. I've been through it all. And this latest letter threatening to take my credentials is just the latest ongoing war that I'm having with the white power structure, but in the interests of Negroes in our community.
The anti-fraud warrior cult mentality. Buyer beware. When we think about the Umar Johnson sector, many words may come to mind: toxic, childish, entertaining, informative, or funny. However, one word that some may dismiss, whether you're pro, anti, or neutral on the Umar Johnson saga, is cult. What is a cult? One definition specifically is a misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing. Other phrases to describe the word cult, in particular to this definition, are obsession with, fixation on, mania for, passion for, or admiration for. So what can lead to someone having this line of thinking when it comes to the Umar Johnson sector and cult? You can make the argument that there is a number of cliques or groups in the sector. There is the good guys, the smoke gang, the neutral side, the linen lovers, etc. However, there is one particular group that embodies not just only a cult-like persona, but also embodies the cult mentality. That group being the anti-fraud warriors. This short documentary will delve into several antics the anti-fraud warrior movement has done and created the effects it had made in the Umar Johnson sector. If we look at the definition of cult mentality, it is an intense interest in and devotion to a person, idea, or activity. The anti-fraud warrior's main target for years now has been Dr. Umar Johnson. There has been many accusations put on about Dr. Johnson from the AFW. Let's look at some. The biggest complaint that the AFW have about Dr. Johnson is that the FDMG school is a scam. They claim the FDMG school was never intended to be open. However, before the buildings were even bought and the donations were being made out to Dr. Johnson, it was said he would never buy a building. Once the buildings were bought in February of 2019, the narrative was then that he didn't own the buildings. Once it was confirmed by people like Make a Change, the narrative was then Dr. Johnson had some elaborate scheme to keep up with his lifestyle. However, online records have shown various permits that proves he is making progress on the school. Even though it is a slow process, the documents don't lie. Online records also show that Dr. Johnson paid $400,000 when Dr. Johnson months before said he raised $750,000. To this day, there has been no absolute proof that Dr. Johnson has misappropriated the funds of FDMG, nor has there been any investigation over the past 11 years that would lead to an arrest or a conviction. However, some AFWs would then push the narratives like white people don't care about blacks getting scammed or it takes time. Yet many black scammers like Fred Scott was in the Umar Johnson sector, was convicted of scamming the black community and was caught up in 2 years. As said in the opening video, according to Johnson, he has been audited several times, and again, nothing has happened. However, the AFW still claim to this day the FDMG school is a scam, and he should be brought to justice. Even a former worker for Dr. Johnson, Don, who has had a nasty falling out with him over non-payment for work, even said in an interview with ENJ that FDMG is not a scam, but that was also ignored. At what point will the public start looking at the AFWs and start questioning their real motives when they can't even explain logically why a scammer would invest $400,000 in poor condition buildings that would cost an estimated $2 million to repair? Why a scammer who has not been convicted after 11 years, yet others have been convicted in less time in the information age? If FDMG is really a scam, why even invest in a $400,000 property to begin with a $2 million estimate to rehab all 4 buildings? This would lead to a non-profit in an elaborate scheme. Not only that, but even when the AFWs want to push the narrative of back taxes, again, online records show that in fact Dr. Johnson has made partial payments. This is a clear example of the cult mentality when a narrative is pushed with no proof, no logical explanation for why the narrative is valid to connect what has really happened. Along with moving the goalposts, along with denying key people who actually work with Dr. Johnson. Unfortunately, because of the toxicity of this narrative being pushed for years, it has brainwashed many, and you would hear similar talking points by people who claim not to be AFW, but still believe that this is a scam without absolute proof. My personal opinion, I simply think it's a bigger project than what was anticipated for Dr. Johnson, along with his Pan-Africanist beliefs of hanging everything black owned. That is why the school is taking so long to open. As I said, there is still no concrete proof of Dr. Johnson misappropriating funds, and until someone actually showcases that proof, that is the story I am sticking to. The AFWs also claim Dr. Johnson doesn't have credentials or degrees. However, much like the questions of him owning FDMG, that was also debunked by several people, and it only takes going to the National Clearinghouse website and paying a few bucks. The AFWs would then change the narrative by saying Dr. Johnson would perform some unethical practices that compromises his profession. So now are we saying Dr. Johnson does in fact have credentials? This is yet another example of the cult mentality in which one thing is said and another is said to invalidate a previous statement. It's often amazing, yet not many people in the AFW and those who claim not to be in the AFW go on with these narratives without even questioning it. What's even more silly is that some AFWs claim the names on the National Clearinghouse website doesn't match the real name of Dr. Johnson, yet these people want to push the narrative that Dr. Johnson has a criminal record and the Umar Johnson name on the record did not match the birth date. Again, this is how the narrative gets spun without fact checking. One of the most disgusting claims made by AFWs is that Dr. Johnson is allegedly a drug addict. Again, to this day, there has been no concrete proof Dr. Johnson is a drug addict. These are serious accusations, and it's very irresponsible for these people who claim to fight fraud not present absolute evidence to these claims. It's very funny, however, when the man who pushes this narrative the most, Lennon Honor, gets accused of being a down low man and being sexually inappropriate to men, and AFW's claims it's an automatic smear campaign due to lack of evidence. So what exactly do you call the narrative being pushed on Dr. Johnson that he is a drug addict with no absolute proof? This is hypocritical and very toxic. And to top it off, the people who believe the Lennon down low allegations, the AFW automatically shuns them, but when people go with the narrative of Dr. Johnson being a drug addict, nothing gets challenged. One of the biggest complaints people have about anti-Umar Johnson people, particularly the AFWs, is the content they produce on YouTube. If the AFWs have a mission to fight fraud, we have to ask questions about the content that involves fighting fraud. However, if you look at the majority of the content being produced, it has nothing to do with fighting fraud, but more so critiquing Dr. Johnson's personal life and the process of the school being open. You rarely see new discoveries that can build a case on Dr. Johnson for misappropriating funds. Instead, we see videos about broken toilets, people painting the school before renovations, illegal lights, disagreements with people like Q Butter and Michael Eric Dyson, accepting wifey resumes, his opinions on interracial dating, etc. What does any of that have to do with fraud? What happened to the mission? The AFWs have gone far away from fighting fraud, but it has now become a Umar Johnson gossip group. If they can stick to the topic of fraud and fraud alone, these AFWs can be taken more seriously. But as usual, this toxic behavior creates more content creators covering the same redundant talking points and getting far away from fraud, but still claim they are fighting fraud and are trying to get Umar Johnson to serve justice. When it comes to people having a different opinion than the AFWs, there is sure to be consequences. Maybe the most notable example of this was Shocking Raw. Shocking Raw in late December 2020 gave a reaction to Monty Woodgrave's parody of Lennon Honor, and it was a very unpopular opinion, mainly siding with Monty Woodgrave's criticism on Lennon. Shocking Raw would debate several AFWs about Lennon's flaws, and it would lead to several subtle disses to shock him from other AFWs. Later in January of 2021, Shocking Raw received a copyright strike from Lennon Honor, and as some would say, the rest is history. This is a clear example of the AFW cult mentality in which there is no room for critique of any AFW member. Let me see your transcript. An AFW member even went out of the way to tell people to not support or watch any Shocking Raw videos. This is a clear indication of wanting to censor someone and to not allow any opinion or critique of any AFW member, even if there is a valid proof or justification to such criticism. This even went as far as Shocking Raw's online school being under attack. Even Make a Change, who has a history of making plenty of anti-Umar Johnson videos, criticized the August Archibald lawsuit, and even took the lawsuit to be looked at by a family member who works in legal, and she also had some critiques about it.
I would first like to say this is not legal advice. So I am sure by now most of you have heard about the lawsuit that has been filed against Umar Johnson. When I first heard about the lawsuit, I said to myself, finally, someone has decided to take legal action. But that thought quickly diminished after seeing the documents. To be honest, after looking at the documents, I felt like my intelligence was insulted. But what do I know? I'm not an attorney. However, I have a family member that is an attorney and owns her own law firm. So I sent the documents over to her and I said, hey, could you take a look at this and give me your take? So yesterday I was conversating with her in regards to some other matters. And she said, hey, by the way, I looked at that document. Where did you get that? Is this a joke? And she explained to me that she has never seen anything like this before. and she don't believe that the person that filed this case has any legal standings. But you never know because sorry, some of this stuff is just hilarious. But she did say you never know because people do file some crazy lawsuits. So I guess we just have to wait and see how this whole thing plays out.
AAS and Reb G went on to do subtle throw shots at Make a Change, and AAS specifically criticized the family member who works as an actual attorney. AAS even questioned the attorney's ethics. You seriously can't directly criticize anything that falls in line with the AFW cult mentality, otherwise consequences will happen. After the Shockumentary boycott, things got even more disturbing and rather desperate in attempts of recruiting, as the ringleader of the AFW, AAS, started heavily promoting Taz. Taz, even though is an anti-Umar content creator, was never a god that will represent or match AAS persona on YouTube. AAS has made several claims and now deleted videos to be an advocate for domestic violence. However, Taz has a criminal record in domestic violence. Also, AAS in several videos says Umar is homophobic and used this as a talking point as a negative towards Dr. Johnson. However, recently AAS promoted a woman named Mona De Leon who has made several gay slurs towards Shockumentary. AAS as of recently has also tried to do insinuations that certain people opposite of her AFW group were homosexual. Keep in mind, this is the same woman who tries to portray Umar Johnson as a homophobe, yet is promoting someone who uses gay slurs towards another person and uses insinuations that someone is gay, contradicts AAS value system when it comes to the LGBT community. Yet no one in the AFW has ever called this out in public. It even gotten to the point where now people like Taz and Mona are being accepted in other circles without being called out for their transgressions that fall in the same value system, quote unquote, as AAS. One of the most common things that doesn't get called out on AAS from the AFWs are the allegations of several content creators. AAS has made claims that TCTV has paid Dawn off to do live streams and skits to cover up the story told by the Only One, in which the story was that Dawn and TC had a falling out, and this led to Dawn being out on the streets. Even with the husband of the Only One admitting that the story was false, AAS at the time of this recording has yet to pull down any videos or community messages that portrayed this fraud story. This is a very disgusting tactic used by AAS, and no one in the AFW has publicly called her out for this. AAS has also made several videos that's now deleted accusing D. Durrell of using other people's names to fill the void that he is not really a mental health therapist, in which this was proven to be false as well. She even came at Claudia Taylor, in which she alleges that she has been making money off her former co-worker in which he has passed away years ago with no actual evidence. These people AAS has painted a negative narrative, has given a bad representation of people's characters, and no AFW member has publicly denounced these tactics by AAS. The latest AAS has done, recording a phone call to a alleged FBI agent due to Poetic Flacco allegedly using sexually threatening messages to her via the internet, in which Flacco along with Shockumentary denied has happened. According to AAS, her local police department advised her to call the FBI about her complaint. Keep in mind, Poetic Flacco lives across the country. Lennon Honor is claimed to be a comedian. However, in comedy, there is an art form and a reason why you make jokes. Lennon Honor is criticized by some as a guy who cyberbullies Dr. Johnson by wearing dashikis and making fun of African spirituality. If we are being objective here, at one point, can we ask ourselves what exactly is the punchline in all of this? If we can't find the punchline and how it correlates to be funny, then we must analyze if this is a form of cyberbullying. If you ask me, it was never intended to be funny, but to bully a man in Dr. Johnson's beliefs in Pan-Africanism. As usual, however, the fans of Lennon Honor will dig into the bullying by making similar jokes in the super chats and in panels and in comment sections. Albert Lanier, in an interview with Let Me See a Transcript, made some disparaging remarks about Tiffany Griffin. Instead of "let me see a transcript" checking Albert for his remarks, she instead laughed. This was met with major backlash. However, not soon after this interview, others who are anti-Umar allowed this same man to be in their circle. This is yet another example of the cult mentality, to where even people outside the black community can make disgusting remarks about black people, and we forget about it, what it's like to be on code. The common denominator? Albert Lanier was a Dr. Umar Johnson critic. In conclusion, the cult mentality is a very dangerous device that has been used to brainwash many people, especially in the black community. We see this a lot throughout the history in religion, and even though we are not dealing with religion, we are dealing with the religious practice that wants to see the demise of Dr. Umar Johnson. I'm not a Umar Johnson supporter. However, over the years of watching the development of the AFW movement, I couldn't help but see through the facade of a bunch of people who claim to be fighting fraud and protecting the black community. This was never about fraud. This is about tearing down a black man and his vision. Until we get actual evidence that Dr. Johnson is scamming, then that should be the position that many people should take with the AFWs. The best the AFWs have done was to shut down events Dr. Johnson was scheduled to speak at, in which in turn affects his livelihood. It's a disgusting display of what these AFWs represent, and it contradicts their quote-unquote mission. So what's the solution? It starts with several members in the AFW stepping up and speaking out on the flaws of the group. However, with the cult mentality, is it possible? Shock and Raw is an example of hope, to which things can get called out. The question is, though, who else will speak up and stand up on their real principles? If the mission is to throw Umar Johnson in jail, then there needs to be an effort to show concrete proof and documents that can lead to a case. If, however, that can't be produced, the AFWs must admit defeat and move on to a scammer who can actually be proven as such. What's even more strange is that the majority of these AFWs claim they never donated. If they never donated to Dr. Johnson, and if Dr. Johnson has never done anything to them personally, why do they care so much? The loudest critics of Dr. Johnson are the ones who claim they never donated. It's very strange these AFWs make thousands of vids combined, saying the same stuff for years, and going above and beyond to affect the livelihood of Dr. Johnson, which none of this has nothing to do with fighting fraud, like harassing Yasser's restaurant, and claim it's for COVID guidelines, which the event didn't take place beforehand. The cult mentality is a dangerous thing, and it's my hope anyone who feels they're experiencing this can reach out to someone they can trust and find a plan to get out of the cult-like group. I will leave you with this. Always be careful who you hang around with and associate with because you may never know what can really be going on. In the words of a certain someone, never forget to heed the warning. Fire! Beware!